Hello and welcome to the Monday Agenda. The Monday Agenda today is going to look onto the 6th Annual Agricultural Policy Conference, which will take place in Tanzania next week, and we're going to hear a lot more about this conference. With me on the program is Dr. David Nyange, who is the Senior Policy Advisor of Aspire. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Together on the program is Dr. Blandina Kilama, a Senior Researcher from REPOA. Dr. Blandina, most welcome to the program. And Mr. Honest Mseri from ANSAF. Very welcome to the program.
Thank you.
To begin the program, my audience, my viewers, our viewers would like to really understand what is this Annual Agricultural Policy Conference?
Okay. Thank you very much, Austin. Annual Agricultural Policy Conference is an event organized by Policy Analysis Group. This is a group made of 15 organizations that are involved in various policy activities in Tanzania. I can mention a few. We have SRF, ANSAF, Aspires, REPOA, SAGCOT, and others. The objective of this platform is to help the 15 organizations share information on what we are doing, to explore opportunities for collaboration and synergy, avoid duplication, but also coordinate our dialogue with the key stakeholders in policy-making process.
And this is the 6th annual...
Yes, this is the 6th annual conference, and it brings together about 200 key policy stakeholders, mainly from research organizations, as I've mentioned them, but also NGOs involved in development, but most importantly, our key partner, who are agriculture sector lead ministries. We have the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministries of Livestock and Fisheries, Ministry of Industry and Trade. You have PO Raj, or TAMISEMI, which is popularly known as TAMISEMI, and other ministries, including Ministries of Health with regard to nutrition aspect. So we have an opportunity to discuss, to present our research findings, and also make a recommendation for policy review.
Referring to the fact that this is the 6th annual agricultural policy conference, bringing all these very important people under one roof, is the fact that, you know, for the past 6 years you've been doing the policy conference, and agriculture has not been so transformed, has not been doing so well. I remain corrected. Has not been doing so well as the sector contributing to the GDP. Do you think the resources, the strength, should probably be more directed to the farms where the farmers are, or should we really look onto the policy in our beautiful conferences?
I would say, in terms of progress, I would say despite many challenges, the agricultural sector continues to grow.
Okay.
And I can give quite a number of evidence. The first one, that's over 20 years, Tanzania has been self-sufficient. That's undisputable. It's a long time since you have seen yellow maize in the market. Okay. So that one, I think, is a very positive note. But also we see the levels of malnutrition has been declining consistently in the last 15 years. In fact, malnutrition is declining at a rate of 1% per year. But also, we see, of course, decline in poverty, and agriculture has a very big impact in terms of poverty reduction. However, I'm not saying there is no room for improvement. There is a room for improvement in the fact that we have not yet maximized our potential, and that's why we need to continue to invest in the sector, and we need to continue to make progress in terms of reforms. Now, talking about progress in reforms in the last 6 years, I would say we did recently an assessment, and our conclusion is that the pace of reforms has increased. We have recorded over 60 reforms, and in fact, if you count into pieces, you find almost 200 pieces of reforms. Various fees and levies have been abolished. There have been reduction of taxes, of course, increase in tariff of some of the food commodities. And we see some of the early results. For example, this year, for the first time, Tanzania has been able to make progress in the doing business survey by the World Bank. Okay. Tanzania has been able to at least rise by 3 ranks. To me, that's a very important step, given the fact that we've been declining the previous years. But now for the first time we see some improvement. That's one. We see also importation of food commodities has begun to decline, which means now there's increased production in the country. However, we needed to step up processing to make sure that the value-added products are available. Another area that we see very positive sign is that the sector has started to transform. I'll talk more about it, what the transformation
we'll get to transformation. Yeah. Maybe, Dr. Blandina, you can tell us a little bit more onto the content. And probably you can also mention what are some of the expected outcomes of this conference, important conference.
So just to continue where Professor Nyange just ended, so the theme for this year, we're focusing more into looking into the public and private sector investment in agriculture. So in particular, your question was pretty much learning more towards just the people who are engaged directly in agriculture, but we're saying you're not just looking at the private sector alone, but you also have investment that is coming from the public. And we thought it's very important because we understand the more you have different actors engaged, then you're able to tackle some of the challenges that Professor has just highlighted here. And now to continue, in most cases, in previous years, we will focus on just the value chain, and then we will try and see how actors in different nodes, whether successfully managing to gain productivity or just gain some revenue. But this year, this round, actually we're alternating every other year. We're focusing on thematic areas. And this year, so we'll have 7 again, just like the previous years. And we'll focus on, first, looking into the agriculture sector policies. And Professor Nyange touched a little bit on that. And I think once he goes into looking into the economic transformation, then you can see some of the interventions that have been ongoing and the impact that they've had. One thing that Professor Nyange mentioned is like, we are 15 of us. Now, it's one thing to say we are researchers and we are analysts and we do all this research and we want to present it. But if you're presenting in front of the government, or because they are the ones who are also deciding as to how they do all these fiscal decisions, then you understand the processes itself, which we rarely report about. So it's not just this meeting, but we have a lot of other follow-up meetings. The second thematic area we focus on, and Prof also touched on it, is around trade policy. He spoke about, yes, now we're importing less because of some of the policies that we have in the country, and could imply we are having increased production. For this year, again, and we're lucky, again, one of the thematic area is focusing around private sector enabling environment. We've had the blueprint, okay? Last year, quite a number of things were picked and taken up in the budget. And that's a move in the right direction. Whether everything is working or not, that is something else, but we have seen a lot of efforts towards that. Also another thematic area, that number 4, we're focusing on issues around land, natural resource and environment. Okay. And then additionally, we're looking into access, first to farm inputs, but then second, access to finance, which is also very important. And lastly, but not least, but also Professor Nyange touched on this, is around food security, nutrition, and resilience. Okay. So you see, if we focus on all these thematic areas, then we've looked into the agricultural sector more holistically. Yes. Okay. So,
but just to understand, are these picked by the 16, 15, you said you were 15, 16?
Yes.
Or are they coming from actually the people, the farmers themselves, bringing these issues where now you're able to transform them into thematic groups and put them on the table to come with deliberations? Okay. How do you come up with the thematic groups?
Yeah, that's a good one. So as we said, we're PAG, so at one point, and everybody's funded differently, and you never realize that when you see a stock. At the end of the day, it's for the betterment of each Tanzanian. That's what we want to drive to. And so given the kind of interventions we do undertake, so this the thematic areas are informed by the work we do and the challenges we face. So it could be the way I see a certain challenge as REPOA is different from the way ANSAF sees it. But once you sit together and you're like, you know what, that's just a trade policy issue. Let's present that way. Or next time in another round, as I said, sometimes we simply focus on value chain, and then ANSAF will say, we have undertaken value chain analysis around sunflower. And then maybe Dalberg will say, we've also done the same thing. And Rapport might say, we've also done the same thing. And then it allows you to give you all these different lenses of focusing on the same sector at different levels with different intervention.
Okay.
At the center of all this, then the farmer is the person who is at the center of it. But we are just giving voice to that farmer.
The 2 or 3 days of deliberations, what should we expect out of that?
First is to have the dialogue. That's one. But then secondly, as Professor Nyange just said, is to further these discussions. It's one thing to talk. It's not like you talk and you close your books off, you go. But you want to talk more on the issues that you think they've been left out. Or that we've seen intervention, but we're like, we're not sure about this intervention if it's really working well. So pretty much that's very strong. And then thirdly, then bring all these different stakeholders together so that when you're giving out a view, it's not just coming from one side, but rather it's more holistic, including all the stakeholders that are affected.
There are so many challenges facing a farmer.
Yes.
You've mentioned 6 thematic areas, and you're going to, of course, they're broad. You've mentioned policies, you've mentioned trade, you've mentioned finance, but I'm still very keen, and probably Honest will help me to respond to this. How are Tanzania, the agricultural sector employs more than 65%, and most of these people are youth. How are the youth especially involved into this very important policy? How are they participating?
As I've said, youth are very important in the agricultural sector. From the government perspective, from the private sector perspective, this is agriculture is an area where we can employ majority of the young people. So now we have the strategy for involving the young people into the agriculture sector, which is is a 10-year strategy, but unfortunately it's going to an end this 2021. Yeah, so you can imagine that, because now what we want to do with the young people is to show them that agriculture is an area where they can employ themselves, and it's an area where they can have the future. So we as a policy analysis group, and this as a policy conference, we are going to discuss with the government and other stakeholders to show how we can improve and attract more young people to the agriculture sector. So with this conference, and for its sustainability, it's very important now we discuss about the issues which will bring in the young people. And as Dr. Blandita has said, one of the areas we're going to talk about is access to finance. Then we're going to see how we can involve the young people more by facilitating them accessing the finance, because young people are facing a lot of challenges in engaging the agriculture sector, one of them being the finance. And one of the presentations which is going to be made in this annual learning event by ANSAF is how the local government authorities are going to facilitate accessibility of finance to the young people. And we have the directive from the government that the local government have to set aside 10% of their budgets to the young people, women, and people with disabilities. And we have done a survey in about 25 districts in the country. So we are going to suggest how, we are going first to show how the directive have been implemented by districts at those districts, and then we are going to come up with the policy recommendations and how we can improve the accessibility of that access of finance to the young people. But we are not going just to end that, but we are going also to access the kind of investment the young people are going to invest to put into the agriculture sector. We see majority of the young people who are engaged in the agriculture sector, they lack the guidance. Who are going to guide them? Probably like the important skills to make them successful into the agriculture sector. So this AAPC is going to take into account the issue revolving the young people by providing an opportunity for the young people as well to discuss how well they can involve themselves into the agricultural sector.
You're going to discuss and propose a policy, but you already have done your studies and you're going to present your findings. Do you want to, in short, just mention a line or two, and especially for the young people watching the Monday agenda who will not be able to participate in the Dodoma, is that effective? Is it being implemented? Is that 10% set aside, and is it distributed to the young people?
What I can say, because we did a research on the past 3 years, and you can see after the 5th government came in, all the districts are responding in setting aside funds to the young people, women, and people with disabilities.
That is one.
But now, yeah, that is one.
Setting aside.
And that is a very positive sign, and we are commending the government for doing that. But another side of it, as I've said, it's how now most of the young people, and majority of them now are watching. They don't have the information about these funds. So it's very important now we invest to ensure that majority of the young people have the information that there is this kind of support they can get and engage themselves into the agricultural sector. So the government has to invest in disseminating this information through the local government authorities, so young people can be able to know that there is this kind of support which is existing. But also you can see, apart from just giving them funds, but it's not only about giving them funds, but how well they can be coordinated so that we can get value for money out of the investments they are putting in. So these young people, they need to be guided. So the local government authorities needs to work more on building the capacity of this group of young people and women so that they can put into better use these funds which they are getting. But another thing we have observed, you can see the amount of loans they are getting, it's very, very minimal. For instance, throughout, we have not found no one who have got a loan of more than 10 million. So you can see even the amount of investments which have been can be undertaken by this 10 million. So if you think about it, we have different category of the young people. There are those who are coming from the universities. So for instance, if you give a person like that 500,000 or 1 million, probably he will rather continue seeking for these white-collar jobs rather than engage into the agriculture sector. So probably we need to rethink this and provide the amount which will provide an incentive for more young people to see there is really an opportunity for me to get engaged into the agriculture sector. But the other thing you can see is that this is supposed to be a revolving fund. I'm getting the funds so another person can, next time can get it. But you can see there are those who are defaulting, you see. As much as the women's have been the ones who have no default. But if you go in terms of the young people, there are groups which are defaulting simply because they have not done well their business, because this is business. It's about the cost, it's about what you're investing. At the end of the day, it's about what you get out of your investment. So sometimes because of poor investments, these government's fund might be going into waste. And probably another thing we need to see clear now is how now we select and the criteria for selecting the people who are going to access the these finances. So the procedures needs to be more clear, so more young people can feel that if I'm going to apply for this, there is a room for me to get actually this support. So we need to put more clear rules, and actually at the district level, after providing these loans, we need to put aside some funds to make sure that we continue to build the capacity of these groups in terms of value addition. We build their capacity in terms of financial management so that they can be able to manage their business well. And at the end of the day, also, the local government authorities needs to continue monitoring these loans, because sometimes they can give an excuse that we don't have a budget to make a follow-up on the finances which you have given to the groups.
I want you to talk to Tanzanians who are watching the Monday Agenda, and of course the word will go around. Are young people loanable? Can they actually go to any government office and actually claim for this money? But you'll get to me later on. Professor Nyange,
yes.
This is the sixth, I'm repeating, this is the sixth annual agricultural policy conference that you're holding. And you've actually been doing the 5 consecutively. Mm-hmm. How have the 5 impacted the contribution of the agricultural sector into the economy?
As I mentioned earlier, that we have seen very compelling signs that the impact is beginning to be felt. First of all, is the increased pace of reforms which are being recorded over years. Just consider last year, a number of reforms were made. For example, waiving some of the taxes on agriculture technologies which are used by farmers, so that farmers can access them and improve their productivity. There are other areas which we are still dialoguing with the government. For example, removing VAT or import duty on grain storage facilities, which is very important because post-harvest losses here can be as high as 30%, and for fresh produce can be even 50%. Thanks to the government last year, they waived some of the taxes on cold storage. which to me is a very big relief. Cold storage is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. As we see increased consumption of vegetables, fruits, meat. So that's a very positive mood. So I would say the reforms are accelerating.
Okay. I'm wondering, Professor, is maybe Dr. Blandina could respond to this as part of the discussion. Are you looking onto challenges like such? Because I remember Prime Minister speaking all the time during the Nane Nane Farmers events on the post-harvest losses and how we can be reduced. Are you also discussing innovation, technology to actually address some of these challenges that farmers face?
When we speak of technology, okay, in agriculture, that could mean it can come in 3 ways. Okay, so one could be you're moving from using just a local seed to an improved one. That is huge because it's going to increase your production a lot. Or it could be now you're introducing really a better machine. Let's say you were let's say cutting trees and stuff, you were using maybe just a normal panga, and now maybe you have an engine-powered one. That's also a huge change right there. So all this to our technological innovation. And the third bit will be just logistically arranging yourself better so that you're saving a lot of time. That's also can be an innovation when it comes to technology. So for a country like Tanzania, especially when we're a developing country, a lot of your investment, first of all, as Professor Nyange, when he was introducing this talk, that we're also thinking around issues around investment in agribusiness and that, you have to think about how much more can you produce to sufficiently supply to the industries that you're creating. If you can't do that, then just don't bother. Simply don't bother. And I think the discussions that we always tend to have take that direction. Like, hey, it's good we're increasing production and productivity, but then the industries that we have, they will still say, in as much as you increased your production, that still is not big enough for me. And then it means the research institutions that are coming up with all these different new, should I call them innovations, they have to come with better seeds, better ways of producing, better way of preserving, better fertilizer, all that, in order to make sure that you're increasing production sufficiently enough to claim you're having some impact, and that we'll call economic transformation. And I think Professor Nyange would like to touch
You've mentioned things that have almost given me a goosebump, but the farmers also have challenge.
Yes.
The challenge that the farmers have is on the application. Do you also have that as part of the discussion? Because when you tell someone to use fertilizers, for instance, or improved seeds, we hardly have, I think the ratio that I stand of agronomists in Tanzania is still probably 1 to 2,700 farmers. So when you tell farmer, go and use fertilizers, when you tell farmer, use improved seeds, and then you do not give them access to agronomists, access to information, access to knowledge, isn't that gonna, well, yes, bumper harvest today, but what happens tomorrow? Is this part of the discussion you're going to have and coming up with proposed solution? Because we have a gap in that.
Every organization do undertake different intervention. So for instance, some have things like Shamba Darasa, which tries to curb the problem around, having less, not sufficient agronomists everywhere. And then when people see, they're like, so if I do this, this will happen to me, then they go and apply it to their farms. And this is very common. And so it's not only Shamba Darasa when you see like a small plot, but also Shamba Darasa when it comes to preserving, like what Prof was talking about, when it comes to making sure you're controlling the post-harvest losses. Also how you use these dry bags and all that. It's also, it's more around learning by doing and using different interventions. Because when you look at the stats in Tanzania, for instance, when we say only a quarter of Tanzanians can read and write in English, so we are addressing a quarter here. If we needed to do things that they're saying, only a quarter can't read and write in Kiswahili and English. It means everything we do has to be in Kiswahili and English. And if I go to a farmer, that's the mode I have to use. But if I go to Nanjilinji, I have to switch and speak whatever language they speak in Nanjilinji. If I go to someplace in Sumbawanga, I have to do the same. and be accommodative, and that ties in even to the institutions that are there, yeah? The training institutions that are there. And I think they're doing it. VETA does that. Like, they're offering different training in particular locations differently. That is also part of a solution of a thing.
You are watching the Monday Agenda, and the Monday Agenda today is delighted to actually raise the curtains in the discussion about the 6th Annual Agricultural Policy Conference, which will take place in Dodoma, Tanzania next week. And with me on the program, of course, is Professor Nyange, Dr. Blandina, and Mr. Hosea from HANSAV, REPOA, and ASPIRE. Professor Nyange, before I saw you wanted to contribute something towards what Blandina was contributing, but just to get your input as well. The 5th government, under His Excellency John Joseph Pombe Magufuli, is promoting Tanzania to a middle-income state through industrialization. I want, and my viewers as well would really wish to understand the Agricultural Policy Conference contribution, or the role of agriculture and the role of this policy in promoting agriculture towards ensuring that that vision is actually reached.
Okay, thank you. You know, as countries develop, they go through various stages. Usually you start with an agriculture-based economy, and then you move to manufacturing, eventually into a predominantly service-based economy, and then ICT, information and technology. And you know, based on the statistics we have, is that Tanzania's economy has already started to transform towards you know, manufacturing, and you see that with the decrease in the share of labor force, or the share of agriculture in total labor force. In 2000, we were talking about 80% of Tanzanians being in agriculture. Now we are talking about 65.5% of Tanzanians being in agriculture. In other words, Tanzanians are beginning to move slowly into other sectors of the economy, and then the next stage is in the industrial-based economy. So agriculture is really the foundation for industrialization, because it provides raw materials to the industrial sector, but it's also supposed to produce surplus capital to be invested in the industrial sector. And based on the research, which will be shared also during the conference, is that there's a rise of medium-sized farms, which is a very good sign for transformation. And it's at these medium-sized farms that will eventually diversify into agro-processing. So the journey has already started. And we see also other signs. For example, in the past, the major means of land acquisition was inheritance. But if you look at the national surveys and the censuses, you will see the share of land acquired by inheritance is decreasing, with a rapid increase on purchased and leased land. It means the land markets are also evolving. Even though the use of fertilizer and seed is low, but it's on the increasing trend. We see it's increasing. Use of tractors is increasing, use of irrigation is increasing, but also downstream, the value chain at markets, we see now food is becoming more purchased. A lot of people are relying on the market for food, even for rural area. Even though they produce, but they still buy processed food from the market. And I can give you a very simple example. Probably when you are very young, you used to see many hammer mills in rural area. Now they are gradually disappearing, as these mills are consolidating into big industrial establishments. Now you have large millers. Here in Dar es Salaam, in the past, people used to buy maize. Nowadays, nobody's buying maize.
Absolutely.
Most of the maize brought into the cities brought right into the milling facilities. That is transformation. People now are consuming, I would say, more processed food products. For example, wheat. Wheat is becoming a very important food. Potatoes, people eat every day. They eat cuckoo chips. So that's a very good indication that even the changing pattern is decreasing. Is changing, and a lot of people are buying food away from home. And you can see so many food establishments in urban area. But also we see some negative effect of it, particularly in people becoming overweight. In the past, we used to talk about malnutrition, but now we also have a problem of overnutrition. We call it double burden, because you are dealing with malnutrition on one hand, but also overweight on the other hand. leading to increased non-communicable diseases such as heart, high blood pressure, diabetes, and similar diseases.
I'm also thinking onto the thematic areas. I really wish to dwell on the thematic areas, and especially the use and application of fertilizer that you've mentioned, that it's on the increase. And my concern, as I raised earlier, is the fact that the farmer's knowledge on the application may not be parallel to the increase in demand of the application of fertilizers, which again may have consequences. Health hazard. The use of pesticides, for instance, which are harmful to our health, harmful to the food that we eat. What you eat, you become. Some of the presentation that you're anticipating, some of the outcomes in relation to, there's a topic on food. There's a topic on food safety
and standards. Those are
and
some
standards
of the issues that will be discussed.
Yes, and nutrition. Now you're speaking of overnutrition or over malnutrition.
Yeah. So those are consequences of development. That as you develop, you tend to encounter new challenges.
Okay.
And I would say those are new challenges. As food now is becoming produced in large quantities commercially, that's why you need regulation from various crops, livestock, and also fishery sector. So you have coffee farmer, cashew nut farmer, maize farmers represented there. But most importantly, the association. You have, for example, East Africa Grain Council. You have Tanzania Horticulture Association. You have Sunflower Association. So there are so many associations representing various value chains. So farmers' voices are very well represented. You have Agricultural Council of Tanzania, fully represented, and is a member also of the policy analysis group. So farmers' voices are very much heard, and the research that is being presented, all the opinions are coming from the farmers themselves and the consumers as they face various challenges.
Honest, last year but one, through the Ministry of Agriculture, the government launched the ASDP2, Agricultural Sector Development Program 2. And that, I'm sure, the policy conference is going to also look onto the progress. Would you also like to touch base a little bit, giving us a feedback onto how far is Tanzania faring into ASDP2?
An interesting thing this year for the SDP2 is how the government is looking to bring in the private sector. You can look at it from the financing mechanism of the program itself, where about 70% of the program has to be financed through the private sector. But also if you got the component 4 of the program itself, it's about the private sector. It's about the coordination. How are we going to coordinate the private sector and all the stakeholders? But also it's about how are we going to create enabling environment for the private sector to come in. Because the private sector, the ultimate goal is to make profit. So it's how the government now is going to play and bring in those policies, regulatory frameworks, which will really attract the private sector. Because me as an investor, I have several options, and we have several sectors. So I want to see where I can invest my money in. So the role of the government through the SDP2 now is to ensure that there is an enabling environment which will attract more private sector into the sector. And for the agricultural sector to be sustainable, we need to attract more private sector because they are the ones who are implementing. The role of the government is just to create that environment, that is to facilitation. So who now is going to really invest? Who now is going to create those employment? Who now is going to create those raw materials? Who now are going to do the value addition? This is the private sector. So through the SDP2, we think it's very important now we discuss about the policy issues, and we are going to touch the fourth component, which is really into policy issues, and see through the blueprint, as Dr. has said earlier, how are we going to implement the blueprint, and probably beyond the blueprint, what are the emerging challenges to the private sector, and how together the government and the private sector can work together to address these challenges so that we can move forward in the country. Because if we really want to develop our agriculture and move from where we are now, we really need these investments. And partly now, because we need private investment, the government has to start to invest. And the government needs to invest in infrastructures, such as the roads. They need to invest in bringing the electricity, because we have perishable goods. But if you don't have the electricity, no one is going to invest. So the government needs to invest to to develop the market so that people can invest. And earlier I wanted to talk about the post-harvest management, which is also really a part of the SDP2. But last year, the government has launched again a strategy, a 10-year strategy to reduce post-harvest losses in the country. And this, we have the target similar to that of the Malabo, to cut down post-harvest loss by 50% through each value chains. As much as this is only for food crops, but we think if we are going to implement this strategy, which also need the involvement of the private sector, it will help really to ensure that whatever we are getting from the sector is really being maximized.
My friend Honest from ANSAF has mentioned about the engagement and involvement of the private sector. And one of the main areas is spoken passionately about is the access to finance. They're here to invest, they're here to, make profit. But a farmer, that stands at the pivot of this conference. In Tanzania today, most of our farmers are smallholder farmers. Most of them are not loanable. Most of them do not even have the access to this finance. How is this relevant to them, this conference? How is it relevant to them when you're discussing the issues of access to finance? How is it relevant to a smallholder farmer who probably has leased a farm, who does not even know where to get money for seeds, who probably does not even, there are so many when you go to outside the cities, you see them on the road selling their tomatoes. I'm not sure if they go to the private sector today, to a bank or a financial institution, and you tell them, I cultivate potatoes, can I have some loan, 50,000, you're speaking about 10 million. These are even probably looking for 500,000 shillings or less than that. How is this conference relevant to them?
When you're speaking about, you might be just labeling a farmer, but in totality, we're looking at the bigger picture here. So it's not even like, where does the farmer sell their produce, but where do they get their inputs? Because before you start producing, you have to think about where you get your inputs. And what you will find is, and as much as we keep on saying we have these thematic areas, most of them are interlinked.
Correct.
So in such a way, for instance, the question that Professor Nyange also touched on food security and standards, it's one thing to say you want to produce, but for which market are you producing? For any farmer who is integrated with the bigger farmer, and as Professor Nyange said, we will be having a session where some papers will be showcasing how quite a number of farmers are transforming a little bit, becoming medium farmers, and then they're attracting a different kind of market with different standards. For any other farmer to survive, they have to adhere to standards. And I think a strong message that is going to come out from this meeting, and I think it has been coming out from other meetings, it is important to adhere to standards. It should not be like, refuse to sell. It's not about refusing to sell. If you have something of the required standard, you will sell. But if you don't bring something of the required standard, forget it. The market will just ignore you. Now the question is, once the market ignores you, what happens to you? We will continue to call you a small farmer or the misfortune.
When we speak of standard, to a smallholder farmer that we really want to transform, which will be my next question, how does this farmer have access to finance? How does this farmer have knowledge, information, which is again at a cost, towards improving towards what the market wants? The access to finance.
Yes. So the access to finance will come, first of all, when they're organized. In a way, adhering to some form of formality. And in that way, you've seen the likes of PASS, the likes also of Aspire, and a lot of other groups trying to organize farmers so that they can access this finance. And repeatedly saying, just like what Honest was saying here, telling them about management, telling them about things that you should do to be able to continue. It's not fair, not just to the farmers or to anybody else who is producing, just to produce for the sake of it. But it is fair to produce in order at the end of the day you get paid what is required.
When you're telling a farmer to organize themselves, these are farmers in our settings in Tanzania who only knows input, fertilizers, do this, do that, get your potatoes on the road, get them sold, get that money, sell to the passengers passing in the buses. But again, let's leave that for another discussion. Professor, just to end, is the agricultural sector really in Tanzania still relevant today in case of transforming the economy?
I would say
in very few words.
Very, very much. Agriculture sector is the foundation for the industrial base, but agriculture sector is very critical for poverty reduction. And I would say there are a lot of opportunities out there. Tanzania is surrounded by many countries which have food deficit, and they are looking at us. This year, you have floods in the region, you have locust outbreak, some countries are in civil war. All these are looking for food, and Tanzania is considered to be one of the major sources of food. There are over 15 countries around us that we can capture their market and help to transform our farmers, reduce poverty, and improve the well-being of everybody. Tanzania has ample land, ample water resources, but we haven't harnessed that. In fact, one of my friends was telling me one of the things that Tanzania working diligently is to irrigate the ocean. I think the time has come now to expand our irrigation, make use of that water for agricultural production instead of irrigating the ocean.
Is the 6th annual agricultural policy conference, which is to take place in a couple of days, going to ever discuss about ecological agriculture?
The one thing that you find is, because we spoke a lot about soil health last year. It was a big discussion. And after that, people were like, whoa, are you telling me if we're not given the required kind of fertilizer, actually, we're really not really farming? And if you check out the numbers, and Prof here can support that, we're actually not using much fertilizers. And that is one of the things, and we're hoping through such a conference, you'll have to encourage a lot of people to continue to use more.
The 6th annual agricultural policy conference will take place in Dodoma next week from the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th. Watch media for what will be discussed. For those attending, please represent the majority of us. Farming will not be able to farm. And thank you so much for watching the Monday Agenda. I'm your host, Austin Makani, and thanks to my guests on the Monday Agenda. Professor, thank you so much. Doctor,
Thank you.
Mr. Honest. And you're watching the Monday Agenda. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm your host, Austin Makani.